I think you're missing your speaker and your, there we go. Yes, your cam, right. So how's it going? I can't hear you. I still can't hear you, which is weird. Can you hear me? Nothing. Are you on your telephone? You can hear me, right? Okay. So what you might want to try to do is do the same thing I did, just leave and come back, right? No. Maybe if I, oh, there we go. He's out now. Yes, I can hear you. I'm not sure what that was. Okay. So, um, okay. So how have you been?
Good. How you been?
No, not so bad. We went to that the Four Seasons for Mother's birthday, and it was a bit understated because there was no party, although Barbie came over for the evening, and she brought a goose. I couldn't believe it. For three people, it was a lot of meat. We didn't even really scratch it very much, and also chicken. So, but it was nice to have her over, and it made sort of an event rather than just having me there with her in the hotel. Um, but it was nice to be in the hotel. And the next day we went for gym, and so that was, I haven't really been working out in the gym for decades. Um, so that was kind of fun. Uh, so we worked out.
How'd it go? Like, did the trainer show you anything, or like
Your sound is very, very light, Paula. Not sure what my sound is like. Oh, hello, Paula. How are you doing? It's night, I guess. Oh, okay. It's a brilliant day today. So we've got really brilliant sunlight, and it's clear and crisp and slightly dry air here. So we're in very good shape in Hong Kong. And we're down to about half the numbers of COVID cases, Omicron cases that we had. So although most restaurants are now closed, they don't have to be, but there's no reason for them to stay open if they can only have two people per table, and they've been hit by a lot of um, their own staff having come down with or being tested positive for it. So we continue. Pardon me? In there, that's right. Right. I'm told that now that the studies on variants of Omicron using hamsters are all the rage among the scientific communities. So hamsters, I guess, are our choice of model. So
talk about this week in crypto? Yeah. No, I mean, you can. Okay. What are you getting at the grocery store? Vegetables. Yeah. You gonna get some broccoli? You get some broccoli or some leafy greens? You get some leafy greens? I mean, that's not right.
Leafy greens are good.
Oh, what's your meal like? Okay, all right. Just beef. All right. Okay. All right. Enjoy.
Green, but not leafy.
There we go. Okay, all right. Okay. I'm gonna close the door. It's a bit chilly. No, it's good. Dad, pretty much. I mean, I don't know. I guess you noticed this. You can't really tell, but yeah, green. It's weird.
Yeah, tone is very difficult to come over on a webcam, but yes, I can see that it is a kind of nice light green.
Yeah.
It looks very nice
Yeah. It's,
to the extent that I can see it. Right,
Yeah.
it's difficult.
I remember the back wall was all scuffed up. So
Right, I remember. Yes. Have you tried green screening with it?
No, we haven't tried that yet.
I mean, it's not deep enough green for a traditional green screen, but you might actually be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is just pigmentation. Like, there's no that pigment. We can remove that pigment, then you can remove the background, basically.
Right,
If
exactly.
that pigment isn't in my skin tone, which it isn't, then that's
Which it
not
isn't.
my idea.
Right. The one thing I'd caution is avoid shadows.
Right. Well, obviously, having even lighting is the.
That's right. But I bet it would work.
Yeah, it probably would work. Yeah. She's probably.
Okay, so do we want to do what does the invasion of Ukraine have to do with the price of Bitcoin?
Sure. Volatility of assets and investing.
You're if you're actually going to use this, Owen, I think that you'll have a bit of difficulty because the sound isn't that good.
You can't hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't hear you well. I'm not sure. Can you hear me well?
I can try to use a. Let me see if I got it. Is it better now?
That's much better. That's much better.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can hear me well or
I
not.
can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay,
Crystal
fine.
clear.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between your telephone's distant mic and
Yeah.
and my Mac
Microphone here.
and my mic on the MacBook Air, which is
Oh,
actually
that too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
quite good. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how do you want to do it this time? Did you want to say anything? Go back to say anything about Peter Schiff?
Well, I mean, I did actually. I really wanted to have that conversation last week, and I realized there was a confusion of identity with the person that you were talking about. So, given now that you knew who Peter Schiff is, and you've listened to the whole podcast, and his take on it, I mean, the only thing I want to say about, I think it's absolutely fascinating. Everything that he says about his understanding of the potential oncoming, well, if not recession, at least economic potential collapse that he can't predict when that's going to be, but everything he says about the printing of the monetary supply, like all of his arguments are the same arguments that Bitcoin people use. It's just that he doesn't believe in Bitcoin. He doesn't believe basically in non-physical, tangible items as being valuable. You
Right.
can't see it, you can't bite into it, you can't use it. Like his argument for gold is its utility, and he can't see any direct utility. And in our last conversation, we did mention this already, where the value you can see isn't related to utility, but it is related to just kind of a cachet of the time. It is a transaction of the times,
Right.
a reflection of the digital era we live in. And so, as if you want to exchange in zeros and ones purely, that isn't connected at all to any centralized bank, then you use Bitcoin, and that is value to people in today's. I mean, it's not just Bitcoin; it's any cryptocurrency. Dogecoin, Shiba Inu, Ethereum. I mean, yeah, the choice in crypto asset is ever expansive. That being said, so that's what I. All that being said, my like I couldn't help but smile. But all of his arguments are the same arguments that cryptocurrency advocates use. It's just he doesn't use it in favor of cryptocurrency because he believes, all to his knowledge, outside of, he did have one line about smart contracts. He saw that there is sufficient value in smart contracts. I just don't think he's ever, not ever, I don't think he has yet to really, and I don't think we're there in society yet. We're not like using smart contracts in the sale of a house yet. I'm sure if somehow that does happen in the not too distant future, in the next 50 years, maybe his tone might change when it comes to that
No,
direct cryptocurrency.
he was quite happy with blockchain,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And the idea of a distributed database
yeah,
and an
yeah,
immutable database.
yeah,
And having smart contracts within that database, he also said was a good idea.
yeah,
So he
yeah.
has nothing against the technology. All he
Right.
thinks is that Bitcoin as a currency
Yeah,
has no intrinsic value and is
yeah,
probably going to zero eventually. So
yeah,
you're right. On that sense, he and I are quite closely aligned.
yeah,
I think he is more negative with respect to the coming collapse of the US dollar than I am. I don't see it as imminent or really disastrous. He is less optimistic about the shape of the US economy than
yeah,
I am. So,
yeah,
but he's an interesting guy, and he comes from an interesting background. Talking about his father, Peter Schiff, it was interesting the way he cast his father as being essentially a victim. I'm not sure that I would go that far. I think that his father went to prison because he was trying to get other people to do what he was doing, which was not to pay taxes. And I
right.
think that anytime you have uh, a person in the public domain, in the public eye, a famous person that is advocating to break the law, then that person is treading on very thin ice, is likely to be prosecuted and
Mhm.
imprisoned
Right.
because there's rules of governing our society. They need money to govern the society. The money comes from taxes.
Yeah.
You cannot not only break that rule but solicit other people to break that rule and not expect to pay the consequences.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that's all clear. And I guess that's what I wanted to just clarify between you um, and Mr. Schiff is uh, whether or not they're beyond, I guess, his sense of impending doom. I mean, actually, that's maybe a thread I'd like to just clarify a little bit, because I guess you are, as you just said, a little bit more optimistic. And that is definitely a strong narrative in favor of cryptocurrency, if not at least alternative assets that aren't just holding cash. I'm wondering, at least, where does your optimism come from, based off of at least the very large narrative being cast in across crypto communities, across the crypto sphere, which is that there's been what's the exact number? Like the M2 money supply. People will keep on citing it, saying that 40% roughly of the total money that's ever been printed has been printed over the past 2 years.
I think I don't know, because I'm not prepared to say that because I haven't looked at the M2 money supply recently, so I don't know whether that's even true. There has been a tremendous monetary stimulus that has been put in place. It's actually in several waves since the Great Recession. And the argument prior to the middle of the COVID pandemic was that it hadn't caused inflation, and that was true. And that's why the central bank was comfortable with continuing monetary stimulus. There is now more inflation in the United States than there has been for the last 20 years or 30 years. So clearly, there's various reasons that cause inflation, but one of the things that can cause inflation is increase of the money supply. The money supply is extremely difficult to measure because it's a theoretical concept, and it's what people think is their money. It's not what the central bank has as clearing bank deposits or what commercial banks have as deposits. Those are just proxies for or measurable amounts that help people to get a glimpse of what might be the money supply. Okay? But from a theoretical point of view, obviously, if you increase the money supply in a theoretical sense by 10%, then prices will increase by 10%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything else being equal. Everything else being equal. Difficulty is that we don't know what a proper measure of money supply is, and everything else is not equal. So those are difficulties with respect to inflation, but I think it's very difficult to argue right now that increasing money supply has not been a contributing factor to inflation. And that's why the central bank is right now in the United States is ending its expansionary monetary policy. And that's why interest rates are going up. And those interest rates going up obviously are causing a knock-on effect on asset prices. And one of those asset prices is obviously the S&P 500, but another of the asset categories is crypto. Because the correlation between the value of crypto and other financial assets, believe it or not, is positive. So crypto is not a, quote, natural hedge in that sense. Crypto has enjoyed tremendous gains in value since 2009 and since 2017 and whatever it is. But it is, if you run the regression, and I did run the regression of crypto against the S&P 500, and you do it in the same way that you do for any other stock, you end up with a positive beta.
It's correlated. That's so
that when the stock market goes up, you'd predict that crypto would go up. So I mean, it's interesting. The beta is 0.8. Obviously, what was particularly interesting for crypto holders was you had this amazing alpha that continued until about 2021, and so that gave a tremendous boost to their portfolio just from holding crypto.
I'm right now also just double checking what I like that loose fact that was being circulated about the 40% of money being printed, and someone saying that that wasn't the case. The U.S. government technically own these assets. This because this was something. Check the print order archive. I mean, we can, I guess, talk about this in the next recording after
We
the
can do
next
that
meeting.
as the next week. We can say, no, I'm
Yeah,
not sure what that question would be.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that it would be a good idea to have it tied to crypto somehow or other.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Next week, our question is Bitcoin inherently an inflation hedge?
right. So this actually goes directly with that
And
when it
and
comes to
we can
the
put,
printing.
and I can, yeah, and I can talk about printing money in there if you want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's fine, sure. And then
yeah,
we still
yeah,
have to do a question for the week after, and we can set
yeah.
that question now, or we can set it at the end.
Sure. Well, sorry, the question that we just asked, or what? What?
No, the question for next week is
Yeah,
Bitcoin inherently an inflation hedge?
inflation. Yeah,
And so we'd have to define inflation, and we'd have to talk about
yeah,
inflation. And that would take
right.
us in M2 if you'd
Me
like.
too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Yeah, yeah.
um, and and certainly we'll do that. And then my additional point is then we have to have a one for the week afterwards, right? Because we're setting it
Yeah.
sort of 2 weeks in advance. And so my question is, do you want to set that question now, or do you want to wait for our talk and then set the question afterwards?
We can set the question afterwards.
Like,
Because like I mean, so we started this part of the conversation just clarify if there's anything else. And I guess to summarize, because your optimism is, it sounds like it's based off of like it's been fine, so it will continue to be fine. Like I didn't quite like
no,
I
not
couldn't
quite.
quite glean. I didn't quite pick up on.
Yeah, one of the reasons why Schiff was very negative on the U.S. Dollar is because he said at some point people will stop wanting to hold the U.S. dollar as an international currency.
Right.
And the way that he expressed that was that it would happen very quickly, and it would lead to a very serious consequences for the United States.
Mhm.
And and he seemed to be indicating that it would happen fairly soon. So I don't know whether it will happen soon. I don't think it will happen soon. I think that it will be somewhat gradual.
Why? What's the exasperation? Like, what's the?
Well, the exasperation is because the question is who takes its place, right? So when
Right.
when the UK lost its position as the leading with the pound as the leading currency of the world, the United States was there to step in. And the question is, who is there to step in the case of the US losing its prominence? And
What would you say? China's a contender?
well, yes, but it's actually kind of a reluctant contender at this point, because its philosophy is that it does not want its currency to be internationalized. And that's why I think that it would be a slow process. Whereas the philosophy of the US was when it was almost a libertarian philosophy. The philosophy is it doesn't matter if greenbacks are held by other people, if the US dollar are held by other people. And so the US, in the sense of stepping in to be the global currency, it did it relatively naturally.
Right.
And there was also 2 world wars and a depression that helped it become internationalized. And it was really the Second World War, the end of the Second World War, that allowed the US to step in. And I don't see a similar event coming up.
Right. I mean, this can transition us, but before, at least when it comes to the rise in use of the U.S. dollar because of this war that started at the end of February because of Russia and Ukraine. I mean, and so that there, I want to put a pin in that though. Before we get to that, what you just mentioned also brings up at least one more thing to clear up, which is, I mean, Schiff's belief, obviously, that people aren't going to stop using the U.S. dollar. That basically because no, the U.S. doesn't produce anything anymore. Everything is being produced overseas. So this idea that the U.S. like they're not creating value, they're just printing money.
He overstates that as well,
Okay.
right? Because the United States does produce a lot. And the fact is that he believes that no service is worthwhile and goods are worthwhile. And that's not true. Because I think that a clever software programmer is producing value. I think that somebody who's designing a chip is producing value. And those activities, design, service activities, I think that they are sometimes more valuable than the production of the good that's in that value chain. So I think that the fact that designers at Intel are producing the top chips in the world is important. I think that designers of airplanes are important, although Schiff would just see the production of the airplane being important.
Yeah.
So I think that he misses some subtlety there, and that subtlety leads to there being real value that is created by the United States, by Americans in the United States. The reason why various processes were outsourced to other countries of the world was because the price of labor was higher in the United States. And they could continue to produce valuable services, services that were valued internationally, and thereby outsource the production of goods. And I think
so
that
you don't.
And I think that that many of these goods can be re-onshored in the United States without that much difficulty. So I think that it turns out that the balances of the returns to labor are such that U.S. labor becomes cheaper, then you can onshore that those production processes.
Right.
So I think that you see what I mean? I think that he drew it in very stark terms. I don't think on one hand that the United States produces nothing. They are producing highly highly innovation intense goods, and they all are also producing services, and many of those services are high-tech services. And I think that with respect to the low-tech aspects of production, some of that can be re-onshored to the United States, and that can happen relatively quickly. By relatively, I mean over the space of a couple of years, 3 or 4 years.
Sure, but the idea of that happening is based off of worker costs going down, and it doesn't seem like that is the trajectory.
Well, you see, so I do agree that the crisis would happen for that.
Okay. So you believe that there will be a crisis, and that crisis is then what would catapult the production line again. So it's like,
that's right.
You think that he might be putting the cart, well, not necessarily putting the cart before the horse, because you're both kind of agreed that U.S. is seemingly heading towards a collapse. Like that collapse seems to be, if the trajectory doesn't change, which it doesn't seem like there's anything that's necessarily changing the trajectory. I mean, so it's not, I don't know, just to bring up this nuance in the statement, is this all doom and gloom? Like what's the
No, you
What's
see, it's
the
not.
sort of punch?
On one hand, I think that he understates the value of services produced in the United States and the value of some of the goods produced there. I think that he also understates the ability of the system to correct itself when the crisis occurs. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be a crisis, but it's not going to be Armageddon. And he also puts that together with the idea of the U.S. dollar. And I think that the U.S. dollar's central bankers are responsible. So I don't think that they're going to allow inflation to run away from them. And I don't see that there is a viable alternative that will step in right away. So there's various reasons that I think that he is painting a rather more stark picture than I would paint. But I do agree
because
much of his analysis.
Right. So he doesn't trust in the banks correcting, having that correction for inflation. And I guess he doesn't believe that given any economic collapse, that there will be a correction of that in sufficient time. It seems like he's painting the starker, longer, broader picture.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that kind of clarifies things on some level because, yeah, after listening to the podcast, there wasn't like a clear sense that there was any way, or not even any way, because we're not necessarily talking about a way out of this, but rather just that the system set up will correct for it. And that's kind of, I didn't mean to it sound glib, but like when I started this thought thread around like trusting in the systems, the powers that be, like that seems to be the overarching philosophy, that the powers that the system that is currently set up will self-correct even in the case of something, even in the case of a collapse, because the narrative goes, as was the case with the 2008 recession, or housing collapse, market collapse, that the next one will be even bigger, even more detrimental, and we might not be able to come out of that one or something. That seems to be this, the fall of Rome sort of depiction. That, and I guess to put a cap in this part of the conversation, at least, we're saying that the banking system, the Fed, that they won't let that happen.
Yeah. I think that there will be a crisis. The same way that the UK went through a tremendous crisis, starting from the end of the Second World War, and it really didn't come out of it until the late 1970s, early 1980s. So one could see that kind of a crisis, but the UK is still with us.
Right.
Spain is still with us.
Right.
So, so that there is life after death, is what I'm saying.
Right. It's not going to be that detrimental. Right. So to transition into, I guess, this week's topic around like how much is Russia's war, or Putin's war specifically, because it really is Putin. It's not like the Russians that want this. It's really just Putin wanting to make Russia great again.
Right.
It's horrible.
What he wants.
What?
That is what he wants.
Yeah.
And you're right. And Greater Russia included Ukraine. Yeah. And it included Belarus. And it included Kazakhstan, and included Siberia, and it included Moldavia and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and what is now Poland. And it did include all those things. Yeah. And if he wants to make Russia great in that sense, then it involves war. And so it's not quite what his neighbors have in mind as a good way to live. This is unfortunate.
This is always like a weird subject to touch on, to look at like the number side of things, in something that's just as ugh, messed up. Just there's no words to really properly convey the atrocity of the situation. And still, the conversation topic that is worth fleshing out is, well, given, I guess, in times of crisis, I mean, gold's going up, the US dollar is going up. I mean, I just checked prior to this call. Bitcoin has a support at about 38,000. So it's kind of like it's oscillating between like 42,000 and 38,000, 37,000, 37,000. Whether it breaks that support, I mean, this isn't about technical analysis as much as it is about, I guess, the yeah. So what's it at right now? 37,000.
Well, these are daily prices. And so I've said the most recent one, which is, I just took it off, is
I can
38,
look at it right now.
22.
38.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Now, whether
So
is it obviously it varies, right?
right.
So the crisis was about there that it started, right? Which is
Mhm.
that's on when did it start? It started on the 24th. Was that what we're going to say? The 20,
Sure. Yeah.
then the 24th of February is there,
Mhm.
right? So it's the
Yeah.
same as it was when the crisis started.
Right. So that's basically it being illustrated. Like, well, this is how, like, it's almost as if it's been priced in. Um, the considerations. Like, granted, we have no idea how this is going to go. Knock on wood that it doesn't get. I mean, that it does get resolved sooner or
Right.
later. I was talking to Jason the other day, and he gives his of his opinion that, like, Putin needs to be done with this war. He as oh, he gave Putin about 2 weeks. He said if he can't clean it up in 2 weeks, that it's I mean, it seems kind of arbitrary, but I think what he's saying, it needs to happen it as quickly. The longer Putin drags this out, uh, the worse it looks on him, and the less likely he can salvage any positive image. Not that there's
Right.
any
But
positive. I mean, some people like outside of Russia genuinely believe, they empathize with Putin. They empathize with this idea of him being boxed in, that NATO was encroaching on his territory with Ukraine, and he wanted to take back what was rightfully his.
that's right.
Uh,
He wanted his sphere of influence back.
yeah.
Okay.
So
So if you believe in the sphere of influence, if you believe that's legitimate, then he's
yeah,
doing something that is legitimate. And that's
yeah,
what he believes. It doesn't
yeah.
happen to be that which most of the countries of the United Nations believe. It's certainly
Mhm.
not what, the largest non-Russian country in Europe believes. That's
Yeah.
Ukraine. They believe that they have legitimate right to their own country. And that
Yeah.
means, but what's that got to do with the price of Bitcoin? I mean, that's the
Right.
question that we're asking
Yeah.
here. And if you're right, if you see the crisis as starting there on the 24th of February, there's the
Mhm.
24th of February, it bounces back and forth,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
then it has nothing to do with the price of Bitcoin.
Right.
But if you see, um, if you think, well, we have to go back in time to when that
Mhm.
crisis actually started. So when did the crisis actually start? Did it start in January 2021? So here we are where's January 2021? Well, there's
What happened in January 2021?
that was when Zelensky asked to join NATO. Okay,
Okay.
so if you believe that that is the starting point, what's that got to do with the price of Bitcoin? Well, there it is. It was at 30,000 US dollars, and now it's at 38,000 US dollars 2 years later. So it's gone up, what is that? That 8/38, right? What would that be? 8 divided by 38. It's gone up 21% in 2 years, 10% a year. So
Right.
maybe that doesn't have much to do with the prices of Bitcoin either.
No.
Let's look at another time. Perhaps you should really say it really started in January of 2022. Why January of 2022? Well, the reason why is the buildup of armed forces only started in January of 2022. So there's January of 2022. That's when the forces started to build up, and it was at 47,000.
Yeah.
So what's that got to do with the price of Bitcoin? Well, it's dropped from 47 to down around here to around 30. What did we say it is? 47 to 38.
So it's down to 20%.
Okay, but that's not over 2 years. That's over 3 months. So that's a tremendous rate of drop. So it's possible, if you look at all of these as building up to it, and if that was the only thing, and of course, there's many, many, many things that are affecting the price of Bitcoin, right? Because it's a financial asset. But if that was the only thing, one would say that maybe the invasion has a negative effect on the price of Bitcoin. Now, then the next question is, can we tell a story such that there is a negative effect of the invasion on the price of Bitcoin? And I think the answer is yes. Okay. And the answer goes something like this. Bitcoin, when it was, even before Bitcoin was born, back in the 1980s, when people started talking about having a digital decentralized currency, and we had these manifestos for virtual coins. And the idea of those manifestos and the idea of this digital coin was that it would somehow or other free us from the tyranny of central banks, free us from the tyranny of governments. Okay? And so if that is a core aspect of Bitcoin, that it frees us from tyranny of central banks, then what has happened in the Ukraine invasion that has led us to believe that it doesn't free us from the tyranny of central banks? And the answer, of course, is sanctions. Sanctions that work on Bitcoin. Now you can say, well, Bitcoin is surely it's a decentralized currency, such that changing ownership on the block is the transfer of value of Bitcoin from one holder, from one IP address to another IP address. But that assumes that, we are simply transferring value as payment among these IP addresses. And those IP addresses are taking and receiving that Bitcoin as payment. And we know that that's not true. It's not true for two reasons. One, it's not being used as a payments mechanism, which we've talked about before, but also Bitcoin is not directly held by over 99% of the people that hold Bitcoin, right? The people who directly hold Bitcoin are the ones that are participating in the blockchain, that download those, whatever it is, 150 gig of the blockchain every 10 minutes and do this verification of each new block. Those are the people that are actually transacting Bitcoin at a primary level. All the rest of us, 99% of us, what are we doing? We're buying it through exchanges. And we're doing so for two reasons. One, it's convenient. We don't burn up that computer time of pulling down the blockchain every time. I'm not talking about mining. I'm just talking about pulling down the blockchain and verifying it every time, not minting those new coins. But even that pulling down the blockchain and verifying every time is an expensive process from a point of view of blocking up our computers, not allowing us to do other things. So what we do is we use exchanges and we use wallets. And the tricky thing about exchanges and wallets is that they tend to be registered in locations with governments, and they tend to be paying taxes and not wanting to be shut down. And the result is that when there is an international sanction put in place, that international sanction is applied not, well, it's applied to everybody, but it's effectively applied not so much to those 50,000 people that are direct participants in the blockchain, that are what are called full clients. It's applied to the 50 million, us, who hold Bitcoin through wallets and who transact through exchanges. So those sanctions became immediately effective on the exchanges, on the 99% of people that transact through those exchanges and use wallets. Why? Because they actually have locations that are subject to regulatory intervention. That regulatory intervention has become obvious because of the invasion of the Ukraine.
So the sentiment that when everyone's rushing into the bank, and in turn you have, I don't know what fraction of the population, let's say a very small fraction, let's say it's, if it's even 1% of the population, let's not even, let's say 1% of the population, but let's just say that it is this floating supply of, if not Bitcoin or Ethereum or choice of cryptocurrency, to not have to deal with ATMs and long lines and trying to move value, that given you have Wi-Fi access, you're saying that due to sanctions on these large exchanges, you don't find that there is a true gain in efficiency, or maybe efficiency is the wrong word here, but there isn't really a
Gain in liberty.
any added benefits, liberty, freedom, yeah, in the sense that, because once again the Bitcoin is being mostly held on centralized exchanges, and so you still have to get the Bitcoin, if it is Bitcoin that you want, you still have to remove it from a centralized exchange, and that removal is just as cumbersome, if not more cumbersome, than going to an ATM.
It's not cumbersome. It's that it is subject to regulation, subject to effective regulation, right? Now, we're talking about the 99%ers, not the 1%ers. I can go back and talk about the 1%ers in just a moment. But the 99%ers are people like you and me, right? You own crypto, I don't. But you're in a minority, but you're not in a very, very small minority. You know, maybe a quarter of the people in Canada own crypto, or a quarter of the people in the United States own crypto. So it's not trivial. Those people largely are not full clients. Do you know any full clients?
Not ones that get their crypto verified as
not
true crypto in the sense of what you're saying. Like, I haven't heard about that process being necessary. After, like, this brings into the question, I guess, what that verification process that you're talking about, because at least the sanctions being put on these centralized exchanges, in which, so using Binance for example where Binance is, if I think it is at this point the largest centralized exchange of cryptocurrency. So if I chose to go on to Binance to buy Bitcoin and then I store it on my Ledger wallet or using MetaMask, you would say that that removal of Bitcoin is not sufficient in a sense of gaining that freedom.
Okay, so if you have your wallet on Binance or on Coinbase, then those are companies that do not want to go against the law of the country in which they are operating and which they are regulated. And every country is different with respect to its regulations. But if you're talking about things like the US sanctions, the US has told these companies in no uncertain terms that they may not transact services for certain IP addresses. Which IP addresses? Well, it's apparently it's not difficult to determine who, by difficult, I mean, I can't do it, you can't do it, but somebody with the blockchain, which after all records all of the IP transactions of Bitcoin, somebody with that and with a modicum of understanding of the big data operations of these payments can work out who is owning what. Okay, so they can say, well, this IP address, I'm sorry, cannot be transacted in your ledgers. You've got to freeze it. Have they been frozen? Then, yes, they have been frozen. We know it. We know
right.
it.
No,
so yeah, this is the same way
this is available, but then the same way you can like circumvent
that they've been able to seize criminal proceeds. The same way that we've been able to stop money laundering. This is something that's accelerating over the last 5 years. 5 years ago, everybody said, oh, couldn't be done. It turns out that it can be done.
Right. I mean, yeah, assets can be seized. And just the same way that someone can go around a firewall or get a different IP using a VPN. I mean, so this becomes kind of like a battle of wits, technological wits, where like let's not even go down the rabbit hole of how much effort will be required to outsmart someone trying to seize your assets or trying to shut down your IP from even ascertaining your Bitcoin that you purchased. Let's just go down the route of an individual. So you or I, that we've purchased Bitcoin, we put it onto our USB. I mean, we've had this conversation. I don't know if it was part of last week's conversation, but basically the ability just to put it on a USB, and so it's no longer on the cloud. It's not on the centralized exchange. We carry it. We carry it wherever we go.
No, Owen. It is on the cloud. Bitcoin's only existence is on the cloud. What you have on your USB is not Bitcoin. What you have is the private and public codes that will allow you to make a transaction on the cloud. It's not on your USB.
No?
No. So, what's on your USB is the identifying codes.
Right.
That which is on the cloud, renewed every 10 minutes, if you're talking about Bitcoin, roughly speaking, where you have new blocks that are printed every 10 minutes by miners that are mining coin. Okay, and your ownership, your IP address's ownership of that amount of Bitcoin is every 10 minutes renewed. If there's a transaction, that transaction is approved. If there's no transaction, then the untransacted ownership is renewed.
So, like, I'm right now. I'm reading this article right now, and says that Bitcoin is seizure resistant and can only be seized by obtaining the private key to a Bitcoin address.
Right. It's the private
So,
key to
yeah.
your IP address.
Right.
It's the Bitcoin, the system, the blockchain knows that this is owned by your IP address. And it can only be transacted away from your IP address through a cryptographic key. And the key, you can have it in any number of locations. You can copy that key back and forth, but if you keep it only in one location and it's your USB drive, fine. Then if you drop your USB drive down the toilet, of course it's gone.
Right. Right.
But if you had a backup of the computer, then you'd be fine.
Right. So, I mean,
Bitcoin, the actual Bitcoin exists in the decentralized database, in the database that is held by these 50,000, roughly speaking, full clients who every 10 minutes go through the process of renewing the blockchain by approving the next block.
Right.
Because somebody, it was some miner solved that hash 256 problem of the leading 30 plus zeros, and thereby was able to mint the next block. So this is the magic of Bitcoin, and you have the key. Presumably you're the only one that has the key. If another one has the key and can make it look like it's coming from the right IP address, then I guess you can steal it. But most of the action doesn't take place in your direct transactions with the blockchain. Most of the action, 99%, takes place in your transactions with the Coinbases, the Binances of the world. Why? Because it's convenient, and also because you can get real money for it. You can translate it into US dollars or Japanese yen, stuff that you can use elsewhere.
Right. I mean, this is why the general sentiment in cryptocurrency is not your keys, not your wallet. Yeah, basically, if it's not if it's on a centralized exchange, it's not. You don't actually own the crypto, and this is kind of a really summarized version of, I think, what you're saying, which is, if it's on the centralized exchange, you don't own the Bitcoin.
I guess I think that if you worked out the law of it, you would own the Bitcoin, but you're owning it through a custodian, effectively, who is holding it for you. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the first, not first, but definitely one of the early things that people in, like, when you're really in the crypto community, everyone will say, not your keys, not your wallet, which is a summation of basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, in legal terms, like, it is yours, but as you're outlining, they can easily revoke your ownership of it if they deem you to be, for whatever reason, a bad actor.
Right. And the people who are deeming you to be a bad actor tend to be national governments.
Right.
And what has become eminently clear in the action around the Ukrainian invasion is that national governments can exercise power. So at the start of the slide, the Bank of Russia, the Russian central bank, this is before they started actually moving their troops, they said, well, look, we think that we'd like to go the China route, actually. We think we'd like to have a central bank digital coin, and we think that basically Bitcoin and other cryptos should be illegal in our country. They didn't actually pursue that, although they said that banks should not be dealing in crypto. So that's sort of the first step along that route. But they've taken that step. The Chinese, of course, are much farther along that route. The Americans in January of 2022 came out with a white paper And the white paper was talking about this central bank digital coin for the US dollar. Now, what the white paper did is it laid out all the issues. But I think it's fairly clear that the Federal Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve System, thinks that going the route of China, having a central bank digital coin is a good thing. China's farther along that route. They've had several billion renminbi that are being transacted as central bank digital coins, but I think that's the route that we're going to go. So if that's the route we're going to go, what does that do to the price of Bitcoin? It depresses it. Does it depress it to zero? No, probably not. Are there things that you can do with Bitcoin that you can't do with central bank digital coins? Probably yes. Is it less subject to manipulation, if you like, control of the money supply, if you want to think of it in terms of classical macroeconomics, than a central bank digital currency? Of course, it's less subject to central bank control. So this becomes a speculative asset with some monetary properties, and it continues in existence. Will it go to zero eventually? I think so, but subject to what I was saying in my last thought, that it does have some iconic value. The iconic value of a work of art, if you like, a symbol of the digital age.
And so even with that iconic value, I mean, this is kind of taking a step away from the original question of, I mean, we've already sort of illustrated through the chart how much the current war is affecting the price of Bitcoin and in turn other crypto assets, related assets. I guess in what we're saying right now, when it comes to the adoption of a centralized digital currency adopted by every countries in turn, whether it's China that's first out of the gate. Like I've definitely seen ads on Instagram to use a Chinese digital currency. I haven't seen them as of this year, but I did see them last year. Don't know what happened to it. So that, I mean, I feel like that's the whole nother topic that I don't want to dig into that just yet. But what you said just now in regards to Bitcoin probably going to zero, but then equally still maintaining some value because of its cultural cachet, cultural value, exactly. Then that means, at least on some level, maybe not zero, if we believe that is some level of value. So are you willing to adjust that at all? Because once someone makes a statement that Bitcoin is going to zero, as well as, well, is that within our lifetime? I mean, I guess if there's a solar flare potentially, and let's say if within our lifetime there's a solar flare that destroys all digitization, the internet as we know it, like that's a radically different world. We're no longer in the digital world anymore. So without speculating about anything apocalyptic, just to speculate, if we continue on this trajectory and there is a centralized currency released by some major power, like this is still a topic that is I don't know. I feel like this deserves it's like there's so many subheadings to this topic. Like is China first out of the gate, and then like my brain definitely starts going on several different tangents from here. So maybe to bring it back to at least the conversation about this current ongoing war. You mentioned just now when it comes to, I just pulled up a tab saying that Russia is going to, instead of trying to ban crypto, it's going to regulate crypto. Dispels fears of banning. The government plans to license, exchange, and tax large transactions, has supported the central bank, which previously wanted to outlaw mining and trading. Yeah, there was definitely some dissonance.
Well,
I guess
yes, Russia has some some standing in the international crypto world. I mean, I guess United States is number one, and Kazakhstan is number two, and Russia is number three. I think that's the order in terms of mining, and that has something to do with the price of energy, and it has something to do with the way that people think in those countries. So that's interesting that you said that the government has now come out and said, no, we're not going to ban crypto. I mean, it makes some sense that they've reversed their stand since January, because crypto might be kind of useful to them in some transactions. But for the reasons that I mentioned, the 99.1 problem, I think that it's not going to be terribly useful to them. I've seen people say that there isn't the volume available to the Russian central bank or to Russian corporations to really exploit it as an international payments mechanism that can circumvent the actions taken by the Western countries. So,
I mean, this is the point I wanted to segue to, which is that the argument for Russia accepting crypto works in favor of Russia, given all the sanctions currently being like in this war right now. This is kind of the biggest sort of.
So it might get around, exactly. It might get around some of the sanctions for some of the players. And I certainly can see that point. Now, and I'm not sure what the timing of that Russian announcement is, and the trick in these event studies.
February 9th. So this was posted February 9th. And so it says a document setting the principle for the regulation of cryptocurrencies appeared on the government's official website on Tuesday night. So this is in February. Notably, the plan has
February 9th?
February 9th, yeah.
Okay.
So this was like last month. Notably, the plan has the support of the central bank, which had called for a ban on crypto mining and trading. This is the second major regulatory cloud to have been lifted from the global currency market in the month. India last week took a step towards legalization with a tax on digital asset transfer. While it carries a hefty rate, 30%, the tax was seen by many as putting the fifth largest economy on track towards legitimizing crypto. In population, 144 million residents own over 12 million cryptocurrency accounts and about 2 trillion rubles, about 26.7 billion worth of crypto, according to the government's document.
Okay. So here's February the 9th. Okay. Now, the series that I got this from is Fred. Okay. Fred is the Federal Reserve Bank of, one of the banks in the Federal Reserve System of the United States. And so this gives end of day prices. Okay. So this is end of day in the United States. There's February the 9th. And that day it hit 44,402. So that was a peak, right? And maybe it was trading up on the news. I don't know. So it's an incredible story, but I think that these are relatively minor in the grand scheme of things, but absolutely that would be a positive bit of news that the Russian government had come away from their idea of banning crypto.
Yeah, it says here in the article, Bitcoin's price rose about 3% Wednesday morning in the US. Russia's embrace might be having some level of influence on the bellwether cryptocurrency price. An independent crypto analyst said that other market factors, including KPMG Canada adding Bitcoin to its balance sheet, So I'm not too sure what KPMG Canada is.
Well, that's KPMG. That's an accounting firm.
Okay. So it added Bitcoin to its asset. Anyway, so it goes on to further, yeah, market impacts. It's
Okay,
weird that.
you're right.
Hmm?
That you're right that would certainly have caused an uptick. And there's the
Yeah,
uptick. We can see it on my little
yeah,
series here,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's interesting, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and I think that you gave other stories, right? And your other stories with respect to the Ukraine. Clearly,
Mm,
this happened in the Ukrainian invasion. It went up, it
yeah,
went down. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
so the
yeah.
going up, I think, might have been people using Bitcoin in the same way that you showed me about those reporters that bought a car with Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
people
Yeah,
people
yeah,
seeing this as gold and treating it like gold, and then
yeah, yeah.
this might have been the effect of the sanctions. So there we're
Right.
telling minor stories, but I think that
Mm,
really these are relatively minor stories when
mm,
you consider these this flatness since 2021 beginning of the year, and this
mm.
downward progression since November of 2021.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the downward pressure, whether or not it continues. I mean, the belief is until the war stops and the federal, the Fed talks about its monetary policy, what it's going to be doing. This because there's massive uncertainty, and so what people in most crypto circles are saying right now is not to buy in because no one really knows what's happening. No one really ever knows, but at least this idea, like no one has a crystal ball, but at least when policies are clear and when there isn't a war looming and uncertainty, that level of uncertainty is ultimately not helping the price of these what do you call it, risk on assets. That's what I hear them being called uh, because of the immense volatility. So yeah, I mean, I guess what we've outlined so far is there. I mean, you just said that these are relatively minor stories in the maybe grand scheme of Bitcoin, um, but I mean, still, it is clearly impacting it. Clearly, there's an effect, um,
Real
and
people are using it.
yeah, and real people are using it, and so I guess like I don't really know where to take the conversation from here, to be honest.
Okay, well, I think that we've taken the conversation a fair distance. You
Mhm,
know, we've seen my overall point was that there has been an increased ability of regulators to regulate possession of crypto assets and
mhm,
an increased appreciation of that ability. And that the Ukrainian war, I think, has seen a part of that. There's also been an increased use of crypto as a final currency, and we still might see use of crypto as a circumventing currency as the war
yeah,
develops. Um,
yeah,
I think that so the effect, as usual in economics, is mixed. You know, on one hand, on the other hand, uh, and a fairly uh, it's a fairly involved story. I'm not
yeah.
sure where you want to take it um, with the uh, next session that we have. Do you want to take it? Do you want to keep the idea of um, is Bitcoin an inflation hedge? Is that where you want to do next week?
Yeah, I mean, I guess really to given that I guess we've kind of cleared up on some level the question. We've answered it to the best of our ability. The 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 larger scope picture, like this was one of the very first things that, like I remember when I was just getting started at the end of 2020 in trying to learn about like trying to learn about cryptocurrency beyond the fear baiting, beyond it just like at the end of 2020, I was just starting to understand investing in assets on any level. And it just so happened I talked to this one, like I was just talking at this restaurant with Paula, trying to like suss out all of the ideas around it. And someone overheard my conversation and then they chimed in the conversation. And then one of the first things they said was, it's a hedge. It's his version, at least. There was two things he mentioned. I mean, I actually have, I ended up interviewing him. And so I should definitely release that footage too. But it was, well, the more I think about it, it's three things. One, he doesn't like the way gold is being mined, so he doesn't want to buy into that the whole asset of gold. He just doesn't appreciate it. I mean, given the energy implications of Bitcoin and how much energy that takes to mine, he believes that there continues to be greater, more efficient ways to mine it. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation. But to the point of next week's conversation around, is it a hedge against inflation? Yeah, that was, I guess, one. That was his third point. That was like he was saying to me that, and I genuinely didn't even think about it to the degree that he did, where inflation is so baked into our currency, because that's our way to make sure there's always spending. We don't want people to hoard cash, and if we bake in inflation, then that not mandates, but at least it incentivizes people not to just, like, they understand if you leave your money there, you're going to lose value, full stop. And so he likes this idea of this random stranger. He was like, at least when I buy Bitcoin, I feel like with that acceptance of the volatility, and this was at the end of 2020, so Bitcoin hadn't even broke 10 grand yet. So I'm sure he's sitting happy on some level. But yeah, I think it's definitely something really worth unpacking, the degree to which it is a hedge against inflation. And granted, we've this is also including the fact that our very first conversation that we've been touching on here is the understanding that it could go to zero, like, and that seems to already completely cut down. But then, like, with the added nuance that there's always going to be this cultural value to it. So where is it going to sit? Where is it going to sit? Is it going to is it really going to go back to zero? Given maybe a centralized currency, like, we don't know, right? We don't know the timeline of this thing, and we don't know the impact of a centralized currency. Like, how can we?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I think that is it a hedge against inflation? So that's a good topic for next week. We've hit a couple of other potential topics for the week after. I'm not sure whether you want to do central bank digital coins or whether you'd rather not do that. We wanted to stay on Bitcoin, right? So perhaps we shouldn't do central bank digital coins.
No.
There was another.
I think it's worth getting into DeFi.
Why don't I mean, it might be worthwhile doing how you can make money on Bitcoin if Bitcoin is not going up. Okay. And this goes into things that you were talking about, and perhaps we could
yield farming.
Yield farming. So why don't we, so if coming after the thing on inflation, perhaps something on, can you yield farm Bitcoin even when it's not going up?
Yeah, you can. This is like something that I will send you a link to a conversation with a trusted yield farm, like the only public face that is widely touted across crypto communities. I mean, it's centralized to the extent that it is a centralized company, It's a company called Celsius. I use it. It gets me. Um, I mean, I don't have a lot of stable coins there, but if I did, it would yield me about 10% return uh,
Okay,
on
so
a stable coin.
do you want to limit it to Bitcoin, or do you want to make it on crypto in general?
On crypto yield farming.
Okay,
And
can
so
you
I
make
will,
money on crypto? So crypto, even if it's not going up.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so so that would be the thing that we could do in not next week, but the week after.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in preparation for that, at least one thing that's worthwhile listening to is this interview with well, his name escapes me right now, but I'll send you the interview. Um, I'm sure if you do any level of research on him, he's a pretty reputable guy, and he's worthwhile knowing about.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I won't promise to do much research, but I'll certainly do some cramming towards the end so that I can come up with
Sure. No, I mean,
one thing
no.
I said.
Yeah. No, but it's really I mean, it's really inspiring stuff. I find it inspiring because it's giving alternatives. It's giving alternatives where people feel like there aren't any for the most part. Where
Right.
like any bank you hold your money in right now, and it can seem like on a it's like it's too good to be true, right? Like if any bank that you're holding cash in right now gives you 0.1%, then you're telling me this guy is somehow getting me 10%, and that's not a scam? Like, come on. Like and so the way he breaks it down, he says like any bank would be able to do that. They just don't because it's not been part of their policy. They way they make money for themselves. I mean, they're brick and mortar, right? So they have other fees to. You're paying for the brick and mortar. You're not paying for 10%, and no one expects to get 10% right now. So I mean, the argument could be made that for digital banks, which there are some, I mean, there's a digital division of Scotiabank that I use, and they could definitely increase the rates on savings accounts there, but they still don't do that even. And there isn't really brick and mortar there, so I don't know. I guess it's the branding, it's the association, it's the safety, it's the what do you call it? All the regulatory measures. But yeah, this is the part I
I don't
find
think
inspiring.
we don't want that session to go into a critique of banking, right?
Well, you don't have to criticize banking. You can just listen to how the difference in well, we're talking about yield farm. Well, this is like 2 weeks from now. We're talking
Right.
about yield farming. So yeah, I guess if I sent you the interview, would that confuse it? Because should I
Well,
wait
no,
until
it's
next
fine.
week?
As long as we know, I mean, we can critique commercial banking,
Yeah,
and it would be quite a long critique. Okay,
right.
and
Yeah,
as long as we know that we're not getting into that, I'm fine. I'm not going to be uh, pushed to another area. Sure, I'd like to
right.
see what the guy says.
Yeah.
But yeah, one of the things one of the things that's been very refreshing for some people in the academic financial profession
Mhm.
has been that what cryptocurrencies has given us is lashings of clean data.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so in
Mhm.
finance, if you're in the econometric side, you always have problems with clean data, right?
Mhm.
That you want pricing that is true, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because the data comes through various people who have different uses for the data, then often you have problems of coordinating the data.
Yeah.
The data on finance, financial asset prices, concerns assets that are in a highly regulated environment and an environment that has a lot of large players in it.
Yeah.
So the pricing will be affected by that as well. So what
Mhm.
crypto has given some people in finance by financial academic professionals,
Mhm.
given them a way to test their theories
Yeah. Okay.
on
Sounds good.
quote relatively clean data. Now, this is not an area that I'm involved in at all. but
Okay.
I'm kind of bemused to see it coming up because it's a very useful, a valuable service that crypto is providing to what is quite a mainstream academic profession.
Yeah, I mean, just data is at all our fingertips now. And so from your traders to your investors to your speculators, uh, just to have data to reinforce any idea you might have
Test, not
yeah,
necessarily to reinforce, right? It could be to refute.
yeah, to refute, right, obviously, yeah. So to
Right.
test it, to
Test.
stress test it, yeah, is resolving.
Right. It resolves hypotheses. Either
Yeah,
the hypothesis is true or false.
yeah,
And this
right,
gives another set of data and a clean data set on
yeah,
which one can test
yeah,
financial hypotheses, which is quite interesting to see it happening.
yeah, yeah. It's well, I mean, it's nice to have a conversation that isn't just all pie in the sky.
Right. It's pie in the cloud.
Pie in the cloud. Ha. Okay. It's been good. I guess before I end this, what were your major takeaways from this week's conversation?
The changed Russian central bank stance, I wasn't aware of that. It makes a lot of sense. It was fun, you know.
Yeah,
It's always fun to look at data series and to try to tell stories about them.
yeah. My key takeaway is definitely just the ability to have this conversation consistently with you and knowing that it's not an exhaustive one, like exhausting one.
But it is
It's
not exhausting
exhausting.
either, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fun. It's resolving. It is to be able to present information and to see it in real time. And once again, it's not. Yes, this is like I'm reminded of how Bitcoin the price it's priced in for 6 months from now. It's not like that's where people think it will be. Not like these are the I guess futures.
It is an expectation. It's
Yeah,
all financial assets
yeah,
prices are an
yeah,
expectation of future value.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
And
like given that speculation, it's nice to know what we're basing this speculation on.
I'd love to know. If you know
No,
that,
but like what?
you know what the market knows, you know,
No,
you're
right,
made.
fair,
You're
yeah.
made.
Right. No, we were speculating on speculations. Fair, no, fair.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go. Paula's right now heading
Right.
to shop, and I guess I might get some
I'll send
provisions
it
myself.
to you. Did you get the last one? I sent you the last. I sent you the last one, right?
It should be in the WhatsApp chat. Yeah. So I'm reviewing it and just splicing it up, and yeah, it should be.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds good.
Hey,
Okay.
okay,
Take care. Love you.
love you
Bye.
too.